In this video, we're going to finalize our Toyota MR2 Overfender. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in this video, we are going to finish this thing. Now, I say finish, obviously there's always more that we can do, but I want to cover just a few more points, ways in which we can add some additional detail, maybe change the shape or add some more style to this. So we're going to talk about a few different things and sort of a few topics that I want to cover. So to get started, the first thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we're happy with this intake or this opening. And when I take a look at this, everything looks pretty good, but I think I want a little bit more division. I want to push this into the car a bit more, less of a harder transition here. I want it to be a bit smoother. So we're going to talk about ways in which we can do that and potentially add that detail that I mentioned where it goes sort of up and over the fender and back. I also want to note that this process, of these videos that we've gone through, have been pretty exhaustive. It takes a lot of time. And generally when you start a project like this, like if I had an MR2, I would probably step back and look at the car and take some pictures and draw some lines, which would ultimately help me decide where to go. I'm really working off just the scan of the door and the rear fender, and that's kind of all I'm basing these decisions on. So I just thought it was important that we talk about the design decisions, the process that we go through in order to make a design like this. But ultimately, it would have been a bit quicker if we had a little bit clearer idea of what this thing should have looked like. Having said that, I do plan after I'm done to make a sort of overview video. I'm going to try to do sort of a speed modeling version, put a lot of these clips together and just talk about the highlights, the big points. So if somebody doesn't want to spend hours going through this process, they at least have that as a reference. All right, so having said that, let's go ahead and hop into box display mode. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to add an additional loop inside of here. I like the shape that we have here. So I'm going to go to Modify, Insert Edge. It's on the wrong side, so I need to go to negative. And I'm simply going to say negative 0.5. It's going to put it halfway between this edge and this edge here. We'll say OK. And again, we used simple insertion mode. If we take a look at this in Smooth Display and I hide my edges, what this did was add an additional crease, not really a crease, but it added an additional edge for us to help control that shape. You'll notice that it gave us this weird little bulge right here. And that was going to happen because the reason that I added this edge in is because I wasn't really happy with the shape over here. So I actually want to come through. I'm going to hold down Shift and double click this portion, which allows me to grab that entire edge and hit delete. Then I'm going to go to Modify, Insert Point, and I'm just going to simply draw a straight line from here to here. I'm going to hit Enter, and now I've got that straight edge. Now, again, I'm going to hold down Shift, double click here, delete, and then I want to do the same thing here. So click, Shift, double click, and delete. And the reason I did that is because now when I go back and do Insert Point, I can come through and draw those straight edges. I can repeat this process, and I can come from here to here. And the underlying geometry, the patches, the edges, the typology we created look quite a bit better. So if I go to Smooth Display and I hide my edges, that transition is much better. And that's something that we're just going to have to go through the process of doing in order to get the layout to be right. Now remember, we did a lot of work trying to get the shape that we wanted. And the key here is we want to really look at the minimal or the least amount of control possible. Now, for example, this edge right here, I'm not super happy with it. I can double click on this. I can go to Insert Edge. Probably going to do 0.25. Then I'm going to double click on this edge and simply delete it. It gets rid of everything behind it. And if I take a look at this in Smooth Display, hide my edges, I now have gotten rid of some of those additional edges. I can bring back my box display and my edge display. I can take a look at this edge that we created and I can move it wherever I want to. But now I know that the back of that at least is nice and smooth in regards to the shape of everything else. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to pull it back a little bit. I'm going to rotate this around to a side view, bring it up, take a look at it in smooth display. And again, Control 4. And again, the transition is looking better. It's looking smoother, and that's really what we're looking for. I'm still not really happy about this edge here. So we'll go back into box display. And in order to fix that, what we need to do is we need to position one of these edges where we want it. So I'm going to come in and I want to take, actually, I'm going to take this entire edge. So Shift, double click here, modify. We're going to reset our pivot point. We're going to do this right in the middle. Usually what's going to happen is it's going to scale to the middle anyways, but now I'm going to rescale this vertically. And I want to rotate it a little bit. 5 degrees is too much, so I'm going to manually enter 3. That looks about right. And I've sort of just repositioned that a little bit. So Alt and 3 looks pretty smooth. Back in box display. Now, if we're happy with the location of this back edge and we're happy with the direction that everything is going, we can again make some changes if we need to. For example, I'm going to go to Modify and Slide Edge. And maybe I want to take these two and just simply pull them down a bit more. All right, and I might want to do the same thing with these, but in order to get this to work best, I'm going to delete them. I'm going to use Modify, Insert Edge. I'm going to select this. I'm going to go to -0.5. It's going to put it right in between these two edges for me. And then I can use Insert Point. And again, this is a great way for us to sort of smooth out these areas. And I could spend a lot of time. I could spend hours and hours just sort of fixing this stuff. And I don't really think that it's worth it at this point, because every little change is just going to make a slight difference. And this is the process that we have to go through in order to get the shapes to look like we want. You can see everything looks pretty good so far. I'm happy with the shape. It's always a good idea too for us to go into repair body, because we have a lot of star points here. I'm going to allow it to auto repair, make sure that we're happy with the shape. But you can already see that the layout here is looking pretty good. I'm going to go back to box display, and I want to talk about this edge or this seam, this transition that we added here. Originally, I sort of carried that back, and I think it looks pretty good, but I really want it to sort of sweep up. I want some sort of transition that happens that goes up. It's going to be very difficult for us, and what I want to do is I want to start by carrying this creased edge, so probably from here, and I'm going to just begin carrying it up. Before I do that, this back edge is not really needed, so I'm going to delete it, and again, less control is going to be better. Next, let's go to Modify, Insert Point. Let's think about this. So if we pick up off of here, we're going to be carrying up, and we're going to have some conflicting body lines because we've got this sort of crease that happens here. So I think probably picking from here, and I'm just going to carry my way up through the midpoint of each of these edges. And I'm going to go to the midpoint there, and I'm going to say, okay. Remember, anytime we do this, whenever we have a star point, we are not going to have a complete edge. So at this stage, we need to decide, are we connecting this edge down to here? Or are we going to potentially carry it into that crease that comes off the door line? Let's take a look at this in smooth display, and it's probably not had any effect on it at this point because we simply just added those edges. A little bit of surface deformity that happens here from that triangle. But when we look at this in the shadowed version or the shaded version, whatever you want to call it, we need to decide, are we trying to carry this shape up and over, or are we trying to carry this one up and over? When I look at it in smooth display, I think I changed my mind, and it's an easy enough thing to fix. So I'm going to take this edge, delete it, this one here, and delete it. Then I'll go to Insert Point, and I want to carry this from here, and I'm going to carry it all the way into here, allow it to cross this edge. Then I want to delete that, and I'm going to delete that. So keep in mind what we're actually doing here is we're having an effect on the overall shape, right? We have this crease here for a reason, but what I want to do is I want to start to change that crease, and I want to transition it somewhere else. The next thing that I want to do is I want to select some of these edges. So I'm just going to go ahead and carry this all the way back. Insert Edge. Remember, the preview on the screen is going to be in the positive direction. I'm going to do negative, and in this case, I want to do 0.1. I'm going to keep it pretty tight. Then I'm going to go to insert point. We'll go from here down to here and say OK. So now we've kept everything four-sided. This one right here is going down to a point. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. And we still have our five-sided, but we have this triangle here that we have to deal with. Now, if we think about this, this edge right here has an open vertex at the bottom. So I'm going to simply take this and I'm going to move it over to here, which keeps this four-sided. And what that's going to do is it's going to transition that crease that we have, and it's going to start to blend out. Let's take a look at this in smooth display. We don't really like the way this looks yet, but it's a good chance for us to go to repair body, allow it to auto repair, try to fix any deformities that we may have created. And let's take a look at this now. So you can see what we're doing is we're carrying that line and it's going up and over the fender. We've sort of blocked off this section. So this is sort of the defining shape of our flare. And then we've got this upper section where we've got those two divisions, that one that we created before and this new one here. So again, we could spend a lot of time working on these little details in this area. I don't think there's really a big benefit to us doing that, but I think it's important at least that we see the way in which we can add these transitions. We already know that if we want to add more detail, we can offset the edge again, or we can use things like slide edge to put them closer together. And as I'm looking at this, what I think is the right design move is to get rid of this crease that we added, or this transition up here. So I'm going to double click these edges. I'm going to delete them. And then I want to begin to create another crease that carries off of this edge here. So I'm going to come all the way to here. We'll go to insert edge. Remember, the preview is going to be the positive direction. We've got negative, and that's 10% between this upper edge and this bottom edge. That's going to be okay. We can always use slide edge. I'm going to do the same thing here. Remember, the preview is going to be in the positive direction, at least until Autodesk's fix that issue with the preview. We're going to say OK. And then once again, we're going to finish this off with insert point. Whenever we have an issue where we have one of these edges that comes into a star point and we can't instantly take an entire loop and create that edge, we want to make sure that we do an offset on the majority of it. We do an offset up here, and then we can go ahead and use insert point. All right, so now let's go ahead and go to smooth display. Let's take a look, see if we've really messed anything up. So it looks okay. We can go ahead and use slide edge on this. I'm going to go back to my box display and go to modify and slide edge. And I want to pull this down a little bit. So again, the preview is a little bit messed up. Sometimes you have to drag the opposite direction. I'm just going to move it a little bit. Go to Alt-3, Control-4. And now you can see we're carrying those lines. And what we're looking at this point for is we're looking to carry that door line. If I bring back this and I go to Control and 6, we want to carry this door line. We want to carry it up and over the fender, back to the bumper here. We want to carry this door line, which originally just went around the intake scoop. We want to carry that and back. Now, as you look at this as a whole, if we're looking at the entire vehicle, then what we really start to think about is the transition of the shape. Are we creating a wedge? Are we making the back look like it's larger or flared out? Or are we trying to taper these together? We could certainly make some adjustments. We could carry this edge up higher very easily. And we can do that by reconnecting some of these edges if we want to change this to sort of flare up at the end. And the way that we do that is we want to, again, create some additional divisions. And then we want to begin moving them to the correct space. So I'll show you how we're going to do that. We're going to use insert point. We're going to go right in the middle of everything here. And I'm going to bring it down to that corner. And then I'm going to take this edge and delete it. So you can see I still kept all my four sides. Let's go to our smooth display, Control and 4. And you can see what we did was we just simply pushed this up a little bit. We sort of changed that transition. So now we've got this bottom section. That bottom section is sort of a more flattened area. And then this area where we've got the intake scoop is nice and smooth. It's got that nice rounded section. And then the top, we've got this sort of flattened section out. Again, these little details, these nuances, this is where you're going to spend the majority of your time. Now, as I'm looking at this, this is a very crisp edge, but this is very soft up here. And you do have to be kind of careful when you're making this upper edge too hard. We can have these minute body lines here and have them sort of hard. But I think a lot of the auto manufacturers, at least in the more common cars or the newer cars, Toyota is especially bad at this in their newer minivans and like the Highlanders. They just have this really drastic, very hard crease, and they're making the body line look, I don't know, in my opinion, not very good. So we need to be extremely careful when we're talking about adding these edges because it can have a very drastic effect. I'm going to take a look at maybe pulling these closer together, or in this case, I'm going to insert another edge. In this case, I want to go to 0.5, put it right in the middle, take a look at it in smooth display. And now what we did was we tightened up that edge a little bit, but not so much that it's an extremely hard crease. We gave it just enough of a crease. Another thing that we need to consider is the transition into the car, the factory car. You can see that this edge sort of disappears as we get closer to the door frame, but this one is very, very drastic. It's very tight. The crease carries all the way. And if we want to adjust those, we already know what to do. We have 3 edges in this area, but we've only got the 2 down here. So if we want to sort of tighten this up, what we need to do is we need to slide this edge up. We're going to go to our slide edge tool. We're going to just bring this up. The preview is kind of difficult, so you might need to do this a few times, but I'm going to try to get it right in the middle. We could, of course, manually put 0.5 in there, but sometimes visually we want to adjust it a little bit. And then if we need to move this one up, it's going to be a little bit trickier because we might want to tighten the transition here. And the way that we would do that is, again, go to Insert Point, select that, and then I want to sort of put it here and there, hit Enter. And the trick here is that we need to get rid of some of this, and I'm going to do this by going to Weld Vertices. And I'm going to bring this vertex up to here. And this is usually what is going to present some problems when we go to Smooth Display. Let's go to Control 4. It actually looks okay. It didn't. Sometimes you see that ends up really causing a problem and you have to go in and repair the body. But now that shape looks pretty good. We're carrying that body line. We're transitioning it into the scoop, so that's kind of a cool feature. And if we want, we could even push the scoop in a bit more to make it more drastic. And that looks pretty good. I think I want to soften it up at the front edge here. So back in box display. And now what I want to do is I want to go to Insert Point, and I want to just carry this one a little bit wider at the front. And then I want to delete these 2. So again, I'm just trying to slowly widen it. And then this one here, this edge kind of goes down. And I think in order to soften this up, I want to carry this edge and bring it down almost parallel to that, and then get rid of this one. Every time we delete an edge, we're allowing the software to sort of get back to a situation where it's got the least amount of stress in the surfaces. So it's always a good idea for us to add those edges and then remove some additional ones. Now, another thing that we can do as we look at this is we could change the way that this shape transitions. If we want that harder edge, we can tighten up the crease there. If we want to keep it soft, that's perfectly fine. But we do have the ability to sort of tighten it up in some areas and allow it to transition, smooth out in others. And the way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to Insert Point and do it from the side. And I actually want to bring this edge back and then down. And then I want to get rid of these 3. And then I'm going to go back and insert one here and take a look at this in Smooth Display. So again, little minute details. What this is doing is this is bringing that edge back. And I think if we go to Undo, you can kind of see the way it's sort of pinched and it's going down to that corner where we have that edge. And if we redo that, you can see what we're doing is we're taking that tension out of that patch or that face. Let's go ahead and redo that insert edge there. And what we're doing is we're sort of spreading it out. And these are all the little, again, these little minute details are things that you're going to spend a lot of time on. Again, if you look at these edges, you can see that we're carrying this edge and we're pointing it toward the center of the wheel. Same thing here. We're doing this for consistency. We want that nice, smooth transition. And we can continue to work on these. I'm going to go ahead and I think I want to pull this line up a bit more. When I look at it in smooth display, I want to take that line just up a little bit higher, give it a more dramatic look. And I want to do that by, again, I'm going to try to do insert point. So what I want to do is I want to carry this line and I want to kind of carry it up and decide where I want it to go back right to the middle there. And then I want to take these upper edges and delete them. Now, if I just leave it like that, what we've done is we've taken that crease we created and we've dissolved it as it goes back to the back edge of the fender. So you can see the crease is nice here, and then it sort of disappears. That's not what I'm looking for. I really like to have that creased edge. So the way that we do this, again, is with offset. So we're going to create an insert edge. We're going to take these two right here. It's going to be minus 0.1. And then now I can go to insert point from that open point here. And then I can delete these three. So again, now I have actually tightened it up a little bit. If we go to Control 4, you can see that I've actually tightened that crease up as it rolls over the fender. All these little nuances, these little details, this is where we're going to spend a lot of our time. I think it's a little too tight, so we'll come in and we'll try slide edge. I'm going to zoom way in, rotate the other way, just take it out just a little bit. These small changes are going to have drastic effects on the overall design. I can already see that it's pretty tight right here. Let's get rid of those edges. And that looks okay. I think maybe you want to pull that in just a little bit. So let's go ahead and do a little bit more detail work on here. And again, what we can do is go back to a situation where the fender is exactly where it wants to be. And the way that we do that is we get rid of some of these edges and we allow it to sort of restructure itself. So it's going to be a little tricky because we're changing directions here. So we have to do it carefully, or we could try to use things like slide edge. But what I want to do is I want to go to insert point and I want to find out where I want that edge to be. And then I want to delete this one here. And then I'm going to use insert point. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit wider here. And the reason I want to go a little bit wider is because just a hair wider is going to make that crease start to disappear, or that edge start to disappear there. So Control 4, that softened it up a little bit. So that's what I'm looking for. All right, the last thing I think I want to do is I want to try to change the direction of the fender right here. I want to see if I can push it in just a little bit. So let's come in here. And what we can see is that this right here is flared out a little bit and back in. And when we look at it from the side, we can see that we carried this line straight and then it changed direction here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two, delete them, and I am going to draw a straight line between these, allow it to sort of fix the patch or that face. So now the face is a little bit more flat. Going to go to Control 4. And what I did was I allowed it to flare in just a little bit. You can see that there's a slight peak that happens there. I'm going to try to use repair body, allow it to auto repair, see if it fixes any of that stuff. And that edge right there is it's just out a little too far for my liking. So in order to work on this, let's take a look at it in box display. So you can see here, it sort of pushes itself out. So I think in order to really fix this, I'm going to have to get rid of both of these. And what that does is it lets this go back to its natural state without all that tension. And then we can come in and we can use insert point. We can draw a straight line to here. And we can repeat the process. Go ahead and draw another straight line between these two. That's not going to be a great solution, but let's just take a look at it before we do anything else. Yeah, so you can see it's not a great solution. Let's bring back our edges. And let's do Control Z, get back to here. And now let's decide where we want that to be. So I want this to carry forward about to the middle is okay, and then down to this edge. We're going to repeat it now. And again, we want to come forward, down to this edge, and okay. All right, I'm not going to do too much more of this, I promise, but again, this can be a never-ending thing in order to get that shape just right, and I'm okay with it. I'm pretty happy with that. I could, I could spend a lot of time trying to do this. The last thing that I want to do is I want to work on this transition a little bit more. I actually want it to be a little bit tighter. I want to push this back a little bit, so let's give this a shot. Back in box display, and I want to take this, actually I want to take this edge right here. This is the one that's controlling that transition, and I just want to delete it and then take a look at it. So that already, we go to undo, that already tightened up that shape, that transition. And then I also want to take these edges, and I'm going to do it in box display. It's going to be a little bit better. And I want to modify them and pull them out a bit closer. Take a look at it in smooth display. And again, what I'm looking to gain here is a little bit of a tighter edge. So I'm going to probably, let's leave it there. Then double click this edge. We're going to go to Insert. And you can see the positive direction here is the wrong way. So we're going to have to do a negative, and I'm going to do a negative 0.5. Stick it right in the middle. And I want to do that one more time. So I'm going to repeat that process. And the preview is positive, and again, I can't stress this enough. It's kind of a pain right now. And then I want to delete this one. Control 4, just take a look at it. That looks pretty good. If we want to tighten that edge up, of course we can by inserting an edge that's closer. So if we go to Insert Edge, let's do negative 0.1. Get rid of our edges. You can see now what we've done is we've sort of tightened up that edge at transition, give it more of a cut or a knife to direct the wind in there. Okay. All right. So we could obviously spend a little bit more time using pull and getting it back to the door up front. I don't think that I want to waste your time doing that because we've already spent a lot of time playing around with these tools. I think the last thing that I want to focus on is finishing out the back detail. I want to add some cool aero features in here, and I also want to just look at ways in which we can make the back look a little bit more finished. So I'm going to select everything, and this goes a little bit counter to what I've been saying all along, in that you really want to add stuff like this before you get too much detail on. Now, unfortunately, I left this open in the back, and I'm not about to go delete a bunch of edges. So what I want to do at this stage is I want to try to scale that in with a crease on it. So we're going to go Alt and Control and scale this in. And then I am going to scale it horizontally. I'm not holding Alt or Control anymore. And I want to pull this just in slightly and then look at it in smooth display. So we've created that tight edge on the back. It's still selected. So from a right-hand view, I'm going to begin scaling it in the Y direction. I'm going to get it a little closer to matching the shape. And what I'm looking to see is it rolling back inside. We're going to say OK. And if I double click on this edge and I uncrease it, let's see what happens. You can see that it rolls in. That's obviously not the look that we're going for. So this is where we would use Insert Edge, or in this case, I'm actually going to use Bevel, and I'm going to keep the distance pretty tight. I'm going to say 0.1, and that tightens up that edge for me. So you can see it's rolling in, and it tightened it up. Could potentially use a little bit of work here. You can see when we look at it from the side, this edge visually doesn't look great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click here. I'm going to go to Insert Edge. Remember, the positive direction is going to be displayed on the screen, so negative 0.1 will be okay. And with that, I'm going to double click and delete that edge. Let's take a look at it in smooth display. So you can see that already cleaned up that back edge a little bit. And now we can go in and we can use Slide Edge, and we can play around with the location of that just to get the shape right. So as I begin sliding it away, we're starting to get a more gradual transition, and that looks pretty good. We're not done yet. Let's go ahead and double click this. And again, modify. I'm going to view this from the side. Alt and Control, and I'm going to extrude this in. Let's go ahead and rotate this around. So again, we're sort of filling in that fender area. We're going to say okay. And again, now we're just sort of filling this area in. And the reason I want to do this is because I kind of want to add some arrow fins. And the way that I'm going to do this is with that edge selected, I want to go to Insert Edge. I'm going to just add 0.5. Let's see if the preview works. We're going to say okay. And that gave me this division right in the middle, which means that I can delete this back edge or I can add some more. But really what I want to do from the back is I just want to create some fins that go from this toward the body, just visually. I mean, obviously I'm not ducting any air through here. We can see how much of a cavity we created if we're leaving a decent amount of the original fender. So the downside to this is in order to do this, I need to have those divisions. And unless I add Tpoints in here, then I'm going to have to go where I've got those additional divisions. Let's go ahead and do Control-4 and just take a look at it in smooth display. Everything looks pretty good. And let's bring back those edges. And I want to avoid adding too many edges that I don't need, but there are some detail lines that we could potentially add to make this, to potentially add a little bit more detail, right? So we didn't really do much with this shape here, but we could add, or we could tweak the direction this is going, and we could add one here, which would give us some additional edges. I'm not too concerned with it, honestly, but let's just look at the process. Let's do this with Tpoints, and then at least we'll be able to know how to do it. So we're going to insert edge. I'm going to go the other direction. I'm going to say minus 0.5. I'm going to put all this stuff back here. And then I want to go to insert point. So I'm going to break things up from the back. We could use insert edge as well, but I'm going to just break things up back here. And I'm going to go to box display for this. Let's go ahead and cancel that. Let's go to box display. Let's go to insert point. So I want to put a fin down here. And just note that these Tpoints, these are actually going to be pretty bad for us. It's not an ideal situation, but we're just going to make it work here because I don't want to add a bunch of extra divisions to the body. In reality, we could also just do these as their own additional bodies, and that would be fine. And honestly, it's probably a better solution. You know how to do that. You know how to create your own, but we're just going to explore doing it here. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to divide that up, and I'll do this as well. Then we'll go to Modify, Edit Form. I am going to select these right here. I'm going to Control Select those. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let's give it a shot to just save ourselves some time. I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to begin extruding all three of these. Now, before I go too far, I just want to make sure it works. Before I go too far, with these selected, remember in smooth display, what we're actually doing is we're creating these little sort of bumps in the design. So before I go too far, I want to stop there and I want to leave an edge. And this is going to help us control the shape. We could scale them down if we wanted to, but having an edge close to where we started will make sure that the shape stays. I'm going to hit Alt again to extrude one more time. And then I'm just going to take them all the way into the body. We'll say OK, go into smooth display. And now we've sort of added some arrow features. Obviously we could do a bunch more. We could take that entire back edge and just simply move it, maybe scale it in this direction, move it in a little bit. Right, so we can add some detail here so it looks a little bit more polished, it looks a little bit more finished. I'm going to scale it vertically. Yeah, so that's a pretty cool look. And then what you can do on the ends of these faces that we extruded, it's probably good to go in box display, is we could crease the ends so that they're flat. And then what I want to do is I want to select them and I want to extrude, but I'm going to do an extrude scaling out. So this is going to be a little bit tricky based on the way that we're looking at this, but we're going to hold down Alt and scale them out. And you can see here that it's not really working out great in this situation. Let's go ahead and Control Z. Try to view this from the side. It probably means that I need to just do this with one. Alt, scale this one out. That works okay. And then from the side, or the back in this case, just want to pull that in. And then I am going to hold down the Shift key, double click that edge, and I just want to bring the whole thing back in closer to the body. So let's bring this in. And what we're doing is we're sort of just making this pad where it attaches to the body. So in smooth display, we're sort of giving it that wider pad, and then we can use pull to get it to the end there. So if I do the same thing to the other one, first let's go ahead and select these faces from the back. I'm just going to go ahead and pull it out from the body a little bit, and then from this, I'm going to hold down Alt, scale it out. While it's still selected, we're going to go back to that back view and just make sure that we pull it out a little bit. And just to finish this off, let's do the last one. While we're here, we'll just make that selection. Again, from the back, it's going to be a little bit easier just to pull this out. If you want it to be a bit more drastic, we would put it farther away from the body. Alt to scale this up. And just like with everything else, the more edges that you add, the more control you're going to have over the transition of that shape. So I'm going to scale this one up. And then I probably want to take this edge and just move it to tighten that transition. This one here, I want to scale out a bit. And let's go ahead and we'll just select these faces and we'll scale them out. And with those faces selected, we can go to crease. We can crease that. We can do the same thing here. Get a crease where it's going to attach to the body. And that's going to be a little bit easier for us to handle. I'm going to go ahead and crease this one. And find that other edge right there. Okay. All right. So as you can see, we've added those little arrow features in the back. They could be attachment points for the Fender. They could just be little ducks. You could create a mesh in here. You can do all kinds of stuff. But the important thing to note is that we've got a lot of options. We can control the way that we add these details. In reality, those would be separate bodies, but again, we're just playing with the shape. All right, so at this phase, as I mentioned, I could go on for hours and hours tweaking, manipulating, changing everything that we've done. But I'm really happy with the shape. I'm happy with this style line that we've got going back. I'm happy with this one that we were able to add. And I like the way that it transitions in this corner. I like the shape and the way that the light hits this. This is the kind of details and features that you want to spend a lot of time and make sure that you understand the nuance of adding them, because that's going to make the difference between something that just looks like a big blob that we stuck on to sort of a finished product. And if I bring back the original sort of, let's see, this version where we just sort of made the shape before we really added any detail, if we take those edges, you can just see that there's a little bit of problems here, but you can just see that there's no shape to it. It's just a big thing that we stuck to the side. And now we've got this style here where we're carrying the lines from the door and we sort of carried them back to make the flare. Now, this design here, I'm going to go ahead and leave a link in the description. I'm going to pull out the mesh and the scan, but I'll leave this in here so that you guys can come in, you can continue to play around with it. You can add any details or change anything you want. I'll probably do just a little bit more to clean up these fins in the back. But at this stage, again, I also mentioned that I plan on doing like a quick voiced over version of this where we talk more about the minute differences that we had between all the different phases, the things that you need to watch out for, and so on. But at this stage, if you followed along and you want to send me your work, make sure that you do email me, support@cadjucator.com. Leave comments in the video below. Make sure that you ask me any questions. If you had any problems or didn't understand anything I did, or possibly a reason why I did something, then please let me know. I'm happy to try to help and make sure that you guys, that this process is as painless as possible. There is going to be, no matter what you do, there is going to be a lot of trial and error. You can see how many times the deleted edges and added edges and move things around, and that is part of this process. There is not going to be a single time where you just go in and get it right. And I can promise you that you will have to delete some edges or add some edges to get the geometry right if you're taking the time to get those minute details. At this stage, again, comment below if you have any questions or comments. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.